Hello, true believers. Welcome back to Frank Brockhart. I am BrianFBroxton, and we're gonna get into something dark and mysterious. We're drawing Blade, bro. You know, with all the hype that's going on with Marvel Zombies, I was like, let me draw my own version of Blade. So we're gonna dive into the depths of the Blade carrying vampire, the Daywalker himself. Blade, let's do it! Alright, so first things first. Now I started off, with the proportions, and Blade, he started off kind of big and bulky, so I was looking at it, I was like, oh, he looks like a beefcake. I'm going to have to tone him down a little bit. So I took Blade's, silhouette, which is iconic. He's lean and mean, muscular, and, I wanted him to have like a nice hunter stance. So I started with the basic sketch, just drawing the torso, legs, arms, stuff like that. And then, I had to, throw his head in there because I wanted to give him like that little iconic box fade. And, this guy, he's judging the night with his stance, keeping the lines loose. That's what you're supposed to do with Blade, just like, building that skeleton up, you know what I'm saying? So, I'm thinking, let's just, draw him, since he's a martial artist, give him like a nice pose, show some energy, don't make it stiff or whatever. So, that's what I was attempting to do. So now let's build him up. Strong jaw, flat top, shave, locked in place. Man, that's Wesley Snipes all over, calm but dangerous. I like exaggerating that, that trench coat he has. I did like a different thing with the trench coat. I had like a little rope that kind of ties up in the front, and he had one shoulder on, one shoulder off, have it, flapping in the wind a little bit. So, I made some adjustments here and there. I just wanted to kind of give it a windy, whimsical kind of high energy. Well, not super high energy, but like, you got some wind blowing in the breeze. He's ready to like take that blade out and just slice and dice, So, his sword is still sheathed, but I was going to do a quick little motion on his hands to show like he's super fast. So he already done cut everybody up before they even, notice anything. So, and then, and I think I pulled that off, at least with the thumbnail that I put out. So, I may add it on a little later, but, hey, you get the gist, so, I added like the chest harnesses, and then I added like the, his stakes in there, giving a little drama, blood on the ground. So, and a little bit of, trivia here, did you know Blade's first appearance was in Tomb of Dracula number 10 back in 1973? Totally different look. Green jacket, yellow goggles, not the sleek version that we know now. It wasn't until Wesley Snipes that Blade became the iconic, look that we know of till this day. You know what I'm saying? So now going to the, the Marvel Zombies thing, since this is Marvel Zombies and inspired a little bit by Marvel Zombies, but more so with, the Wesley Snipes look, I wanted to push the horror vibe a little bit, the blood all over the ground, it's like blood, he's stepping in the blood, he got blood puddles and stuff. So, just giving him a little bit of that, look, and, I didn't want to do too much of a torn, kind of tattered look, so I kept it kind of nice and clean, I think it's like a nice look, with him dealing with the undead, you know what I'm saying? So once the anatomy and the gear was all down, I went in, cleaned up the lines. I really love making his, sword, kind of like, this one was a little basic, just kind of, I gave him a different kind of sword this time. It was more like a Japanese-ish kind of sword, just straight blade, bold, so I kept it simple. I didn't go crazy or anything. So, and I kept like my heavy, bold, strokes and, around the edges and, things like that. I wanted to try something a little different with the color. So I kept it kind of like the red, black, and gray, but the gray wasn't really like a true gray. It was more of like a brownish, dirty brownish kind of gray tones or whatever. So I don't know. I just want to do something a little different, So, and, if you're doing this digitally, don't be afraid to zoom in and, work on shading and, little reflections, all that stuff goes a long way to kind of bring the character out a little bit, some faint silhouettes, zombies reflecting in the glasses, something, that could be cool too. Now with his glasses, I wanted to show like the red eyes, vampire, just moving quickly, like his head's turning and the eyes glows from his eyes, you know what I'm saying? So I think all that turned out pretty cool in my, point of view or whatever. So now, I told you about Blade's palette and everything. I kept the tones kind of like, real basic, just based off of like, a nice tone for like zombies and stuff like that. Not that he's fighting zombies particularly in this one right here. I may add some later, but who knows? We'll see. So the final step is the atmosphere, and that's the blood on the ground everywhere, so, I gave it like that nice kind of cool look. It looks great. I think everything, I could have added like some more highlights, some more shadows, but I think I was pretty much, happy with, what I have so far. So, I may go back later and add some more things, but for right now, I dug what this thing was, developing into, So there you have it. My version of Blade, Marvel, zombie style. Wesley Snipes meets, Pinterest meets all the designs I could find, to kind of build up his suit and everything like that. I'm a fellow fan. Let me know in your comments. Let me know if it sucked or not. Let me know what to draw next. Should I draw like a zombie Captain America next, or should I draw like a zombie anything? Let me know. So don't forget to like and subscribe, for more of these illustrations every freaking week, because I'm drawing like crazy, man. And thanks for watching, true believers. Stay sharp, keep creating. Peace out.